Today, more than 22,000 public land ranchers maintain 250 million acres of U.S. public land. These ranchers are widely recognized for their work to protect the environment in which they live and operate, safeguarding open spaces, maintaining water sources, and sustaining plant and wildlife populations. Brenda Richards is the PLC president from Reynolds Creek, Idaho, and says 2015 was a year of wins and some disappointments for public land ranchers.
We did get some things through on the Grazing Improvement Act, which allowed some certainty on permit renewals for some people. There's some trailing language in there too for the sheep industry that we need to get clarified, as seems to be the situation with this administration. The agency's interpretation of intention isn't always the same, so we're working to clarify that. WOTUS was a huge disappointment, but we're challenging on that. The Public Lands Council is in on the Waters of the United States cases. We're in on sage grouse, on those types of things, forest land planning rules. So we're there. We had a few wins, but we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Richards says the Public Lands Council's 2016 priorities include some very big issues for both private and public land ranchers.
One of the big things we're going to continue to work on is Waters of the United States, because that affects every rancher, public land ranchers included. We're going to be working on endangered species reform. As you know, the sage grouse has been front and center since the early 1990s, and then the not warranted listing or ruling came out, which is good, but the land use plans from the Forest Service and BLM have caused a lot of consternation for the public lands ranchers. So that's going to be one of the things. We continue to work on EJA reform, equal access to justice, because that helps drive some agendas. And we're working very hard to assure that those public land ranchers stay out there in full viability for their businesses, because they are vital to the rural communities that are the backbone of the West.
The conflict between bighorn sheep and domestic sheep is another real threat to the sustainability of keeping ranchers on public lands, especially sheep producers, and that's why the Public Lands Council has joined the American Sheep Industry Association in fighting the U.S. Forest Service to maintain grazing allotments where bighorn sheep and domestic sheep coexist.
One of the biggest concerns we have is that it's not based on sound science. The science continues to be ignored. And the other concern that we have is they've brought things like pack goats into it. And we know that it wouldn't be too far-fetched for them to bring the cattle industry into it. So not only do the sheep producers use a number of acres that could be threatened, but it's also looking at the entire livestock industry.
Like other segments of U.S. agriculture, public lands grazing is the economic backbone of countless rural communities, especially within 11 western states. And recent data shows public lands ranching contributed $1.5 billion to the U.S. economy and supported more than 18,000 jobs. I'm Russell Nimitz reporting.